Hello everybody, I want to show you a game between Maurice Ashley with the white pieces and Grandmaster Larry Christiansen with the black pieces. Game started out e4 from Maurice, g6, modern defense by Larry Christiansen, d4, bishop g7, knight c3, c6. So we have some transposition into a caro kann, h3, just simply indirectly supporting uh, the d4 square, since bishop g4 would be an inconvenient pin on this knight with the impending exchange on e4. Knight f6, so Larry uses the tempi um, that Maurice used to play h3 to attack the center even more. And now Maurice is faced with some choices. He can advance, he can exchange, or he can protect. So Maurice decides to protect in this game. The downside of protection, now each has its pro and con, but the downside of just protecting, as Maurice does here, is this allows Christensen to trade off some minor pieces, which of course lessens the white player's attacking prospects. Knight takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop takes e4. So we see the some minor pieces come off the board. Then bishop f5. So some of you are saying, wait a minute, this is taking piece trades too far. What happens if bishop takes f5, g takes f5? Yes, this would be a structural concession by black, and we can argue that black has taken it too far. However, the idea Christensen had in mind is to play queen a5 check, exploiting the fact white hasn't castled yet, and pick up the bishop with the queen. So c3 was played, and now queen takes f5. So Larry has been able to trade off two pair of minor pieces and keep his pawn structure intact. Castle, knight d7. Sorry about that. Rook e1, e6. And now this queen being here is very annoying for white. So this maneuver is planning to deal with that. So moves like knight c4 and the idea to come back to e3, booting this queen out of the territory. Castle, knight c4, queen d5, knight e3, and now queen d6. Maurice plays queen f3 here, rook a e8, and now Maurice plays b3. And there's ideas now of knight c4 followed by bishop a3. After all, if you look at white's development, the bishop on c1 needs to go somewhere. So there's not too many places to go that are really good placement for the piece, but bishop a3 would be an excellent place, and the rooks would also be connected at the same time. Let me say on black's end that in these typical Slav structures, black wants to liberate his position with the move e5 or c5. Now, in the ideal setting, usually e5 is the move that you want. If you had a choice, you would want to liberate with e5. Unfortunately, white has moves too, and so usually the easier break to get in is c5. So here after b3, tactician Christensen plays the move c5. So again, example, if e5 here, then the plan would work. Knight c7, queen c7, and bishop a3 with this pressure on this rook here. So c5 is played. However, Now Maurice takes on b7. Now, if you're familiar with Larry Christiansen, he's a very aggressive and dynamic player. So it's not that he just overlooked the pawn here, but he has an idea in mind. He wants to exploit this diagonal, this rook here, and try to exploit the fact that black has not really finished developing it. White hasn't finished developing it. So queen takes b7, c takes d4, c takes d4, and now bishop takes d4. Walking right into this pin. Of course, Christensen has seen this, and he plays rook d8. Now, rook d8 is a mistake here, and I'll show you why. Better was e5, and I'll give you an sample variation. So bishop b2, trying to exploit the pin. Knight c5, hitting the queen. Queen to b4. Rook b8. And now queen c4. Rook f d8. Knight c2. Knight e6. Knight takes d4. And e takes d4. Rook a c1. Queen e5. And now we can see that black has an isolated pawn, but it's not a bad isolated pawn. It's protected, and the argument is going to be whether it's weak or not. Can white prove that it's weak? Can black advance the pawn and create more troubles in the white position? All right, so this position right here is dynamically equal. Black's pieces are well placed in order to further assist his pawn, and white's pieces are well placed also, and plus having this dark square bishop combined with these weak dark squares gives white ample opportunity also. This anchor is very important in this position. In the game, again, Christensen played the move rook d8. Maurice took advantage of this and played the move queen takes a7, and bishop takes a7, rook d6. Okay, and knight f6, and then some trades ensued. Now I want to go back and just show you why the pawn coming to e5 was important. So now again, e5 anchoring the bishop. So now the queen is free to move out of the way if it needs to. And now let's try this. Queen takes a7. Rook a8. Notice that with the pawn on e5, there's no threat to win this bishop. Okay, because the pawn is there supporting it. With the pawn here, there's a threat to win the bishop. So bishop takes a7 is pretty much forced. This variation, black doesn't have to worry about that and can just simply attack the queen again. Queen b7, knight c5, queen b4, and black gets super active. Queen c4. I'm sorry, I messed up. After queen c4, just simply knight takes b3. Exploiting the fact that this pawn can't really capture the knight because of the situation this rook is in down on a1. If pawn captures knight, then rook will simply take on a1. So this anchor is extremely important. Back to the game. Rook d8 was played by Christensen, and this allowed queen takes a7. Notice now there's a double attack here. So bishop takes a7. Rook takes d6, knight f6, and now Maurice starts exchanging pieces. Why? Because it benefits him. Usually when you have like some type of static advantage, you want to reduce your opponent's dynamic possibilities. It's like a general rule. And so he wants to start trading things off and just run up the board with those two outside pass pawns. d8, developing with tempo, it's all good. Knight e4, rook d1. Again, Maurice offering more trades. Christensen tries to avoid And now bishop d4 again. Another trade. Bishop takes, and the knight is attacked. So Christiansen has to postpone his attack on a2. Knight c3. Again, attacking again, rook c4. And here, knight takes a2 is played. However, this gives Maurice what he wants, which is to just simply trade down even more, and Maurice played here, forcing the exchange of rooks. A more dynamic opportunity would have arose from the move knight e2. King f1, rook takes a2, let's say b4, e5, g3. Again, there's that anchor or a support point, outpost, whatever word you want to use. Knight d4, knight g4, knight f3, rook c3, rook a1, king g2, knight e1. And the point is of all of this is to show that black gets very active, and his activity is enough to compensate for this pawn being outside and passed. Okay, his pieces are very active. So after king h2, rook b1, getting behind the passed pawn. Knight takes e5, rook takes b4, check, king g7, and this game obviously would end up in a draw. So when you're in a statically worse position, for instance, your opponent has, the better pawn structure, the passed pawns, he has all those good static advantages. You want to seek for dynamic counterplay. So here, definitely playing knight e2 and not going into this this variation right here, which allows all the dynamics to be sucked right out of the position. You want to choose the dynamic continuation. So rook takes, and b takes a4, and knight b4 is played. And these knight endings are similar to king endings in the way that you play them, according to Botvinnik. King e2, king e7, kings are racing to the center, of course. Knight c4, f6, king d2, king d7, king c3, check, king d4, king c6, knight e3, of course, offering another trade, check, king goes over, and now knight f4, putting pressure here. Maurice simply pushes the pawn. Larry plays h5, and now a5. Notice how these two squares can't be occupied by the black king. g5, perhaps hoping for something like this where he has an opportunity to create a pass pawn on the outside on his own. Maurice simply displays g3, knight h3, and Maurice plays g4. Nice move here because all he wants to do is create two pass pawns on the opposite side of the board, which would basically give white a winning game. Black is in trouble, and has to be very careful. He has to choose either the red pill or the blue pill. So for example, if he plays h takes g4, this pawn is passed and you got to get back to stop it. And if he chooses the other pill and he plays g takes h4, then of course the same thing. Again, h takes g4, just simply push. G takes h4, then you capture on h5, and same thing, you got these two guys running wild. Or as the old Scorpions song goes, bad boys running wild. Alright. And if you don't play along with their games, alright, bad boys running wild. So these are bad pawns running wild. That's what Maurice wants to do here. So Christiansen chooses the blue pill. He plays G takes H4, and now you have G takes H5. Knight takes F2. This turned out to be an error. Christensen's last opportunity was to play it safe with Knight G5, making sure that Knight is back there guarding this pawn. As Nimzovich said about past pawns, they must be arrested, stopped, blockaded. He used all kind of words to describe what needs to happen to past pawns. He said they're criminals. They need to be apprehended and like that. He was serious too, and it's true though. You can't play with past pawns. I mean, this game is a living example of that. So Knight G5 had to be played. It wasn't. It had to be played. So H6, King B7. This gives Black a chance to guard this square, stop this pawn, and then at least he has some kind of hope with this pawn, because White has to consider this passed pawn also. This is just a sample line. King D3, H3, Knight F1. So White's attention has to be drawn to Black's pawns now. F3, King A6, King E3, check, King F2, King takes A5, Knight D2, and now the king is free, the black king that is, to get involved. Of course, you can't allow this trade. H2, King G2, and now you can get slick and play Knight takes F3 here, H7, because you got this check. King takes H2 here, and Knight G6 is back just in time. And of course, there's a lot of stuff, but you can see that there's a thin line between winning and losing in these type of endgames here. But just by instinct alone, you have to drop that knight back. So instead, after 43 G takes H5, Christensen played Knight takes F2. And of course, he had something in mind, but he miscalculated. So after H6 happened, he played the move Knight E4. So he was trying to have his cake and eat it too. He was saying, hey, I'm going to get this pawn, and I'm going to get the F2 pawn and get the H6 pawn. Maurice jumped in with Knight F5, attacking this pawn, of course. Knight G5, so Christensen gets back. So it's like, hey, you know, he stopped that pawn, and he's going to stop this pawn. But Knight takes H4, Knight H7, blocking. Knight F5, again blocking. Notice how these pawns are just totally halted, and Black's pieces are real passive. What is he going to do? Knight G5, so he tries to go back and forth. Knight E7. Christensen has no choice but to keep an eye on this pawn, so he goes to King B7. But now Maurice moves up with his king, and now Christensen is on Zugzwang, where he really can't move anything, because this guy will go if he moves the knight. The pawns are weak, so he moves to E4. But after E4, Maurice simply played A6, and Christensen resigned. And the reason why he resigned is because he'll wind up getting mated. Let's say after King A7, this knight will hop into C6, King A8, King B6. Let's keep pushing, E3, Knight D4. The idea is to swing the knight to C7. Knight D4, F5, and now you can use that as a decoy, just like in king and pawn endings. And after knight takes H7, you come to this square, and bang, Knight E6, and then Knight C7 is coming, and that is going to be a wrap. So just a little bit of miscalculation there at the end by Larry Christiansen. Again, instead of knight takes F2, knight g5 immediately. Just that little slip up, coming here instead of going here, that gave Maurice enough time to where he was able to push his pawn and penetrate with his king to the all-important b5 square. So I hope you enjoyed that game. I hope you learned something. Please like, subscribe, donate, and also check the links below. There'll be books on this opening, as in all my videos that I talk about. Whatever the opening is, I'll post some links to books and DVDs. So in this case, it will be on the caro, kann, and also I'll post some links to some of Larry Christiansen's and Maurice Ashley's works also, so that everybody gets supported. All right, so I'll see you guys on the next video.